I guess really, Chris, it's probably your show, so I'll give it to you to start.
All right, here we go. So we'll start off today by the way of a little bit of background. So between 2010 and 2014, the city was seeing a rather drastic increase in the number of injury collisions and overall collisions occurring in the city of Grande Prairie. And as such, administration proposed some strategies to mitigate and ultimately reduce the impacts of those collisions, and developed what we call the Safe City Roads Action Plan, which was its first iteration. And in 2015, the City Council of the day adopted the plan, and that plan had 4 key focus areas, those being enforcement, education, engineering, and analytics. So enhanced traffic enforcement was one of the key focus areas under enforcement, and it formed a critical component to our strategy. So following an assessment of the ATE technologies that existed in the day, as well as different deployment options, such as in-house or contractors or other alternatives, the city decided to proceed with a competitive procurement process, which ultimately led to Global Traffic Group Limited becoming the successful component and being awarded a exclusive contract to provide automated traffic services to the city of Grande Prairie for the term June 1st, 2015 up to May 31st, 2020. The initial contract details, the contract details have varied over the life of the agreement, but initially started in the neighborhood of 160 hours a week of mobile speed enforcement, 24 hours a week of stop sign enforcement, and 24 hours a week of mobile red enforcement, along with up to 10 intersection safety devices. Now, these are not 10 intersections covered in all directions. It's a single direction in intersection, so up to 10 of those. Subsequently, after the first year or two, we saw that the need for that level of enforcement, that number of hours, could be declined. So we worked with Global Traffic and ultimately reduced the hours from 160 hours of speed enforcement down to 126 hours a week, and knocked the stop sign and mobile red light enforcement from 24 hours a week, respectively, down to 15 hours, and then kept the number of ISDs available at up to 10. Within the report, you'll see the responsibilities that Global Traffic Group has as part of the contract at a high level. Basically, it's a turnkey operation. The City of Grande Prairie and the RCMP are responsible for the oversight of the program, so ensuring that the provincial training guidelines are adhered to, ensuring that the provincial operating guidelines are adhered to, working with the RCMP, and the RCMP selects the ultimate speed tolerances for speed zones, and site selection is conducted, ultimately signed off by the RCMP, and Enforcement Services is heavily involved in the review of the analytics and stuff that go into those decisions. The authority and training is done as per the Alberta Solicitor General and Justice and Solicitor General training criteria, and the province of Alberta is ultimately who issues the limited peace officer authorities required by the ATE operators to perform their work. The program over that period of time was reviewed and audited by provincial auditors on 2 occasions. In both occasions, the program came out as compliant with the legislation. The criteria, one of the questions we get asked quite often is how is a zone determined. So when a zone is selected for automated traffic enforcement, like I said, that decision is not made by Global. It's made between the city and the RCMP, particularly Enforcement Services and the RCMP, and the RCMP ultimately have to sign off and approve. And the locations include high-risk locations where the safety of citizens or officers would be at risk through conventional traffic enforcement methods. An example of this would be the Staples intersection, just not a safe place to perform, or the Costco intersection, not safe places to perform regular conventional enforcement. High-frequency locations where data indicates motorists are ignoring or breaking traffic laws on an ongoing basis. High collision locations, high pedestrian volume locations, and then all school, playground, and construction zones. So when I go to analysis of how the ATA Automated Traffic Enforcement Program has operated over the past 5 years, we can say that it's certainly demonstrated to be a highly efficient tool used to target risky driver behaviors. Intersection offenses are clearly risky. When you blow a stop sign or a red light, you're entering an intersection in which people are not expecting you to be there, which kind of speaks for itself. When we get questioned about speed and why speed matters, where speed makes the biggest difference in collisions is severity. The faster a vehicle is moving when it collides with another vehicle directly correlates to how severe the damage and potential for injury or fatalities is. And I have a fancy little graph on that, but once you get past 30 kilometers an hour, every 10-kilometer increment is a disproportionately rapidly increasing severity. So where things are relatively close for fatality risk at like being struck by an object and moving at 20, 30 kilometers an hour, once you get over 50, it jumps up greatly. Additionally, ATE can process infractions quicker, more reliably, and safer than can conventional enforcement in most environments. Some additional benefits include it's indiscriminate. Frankly, the technology nor operator cares whether you're a soccer mom, whether you're the director of protective and social services, whether you're a city councilor, or anybody else for that matter. It's indiscriminate in that it's not subject to an operator's opinions or profiling. It sends a ticket out regardless. Has little impact on traffic flows, where conventional enforcement will often require a police officer or peace officer to use the marked police vehicle to actually pull over a vehicle within traffic, which can create congestion, obviously, on some of our roadways. The equipment captures substantial evidence, which results in strong court packages. So one of the things we hear quite often is, I'd rather get a ticket from a cop or rather get a ticket from a person. Our statistics show that that's not entirely accurate, because approximately 1 in 10 conventional traffic enforcement tickets we issue result in not guilty pleas and court trials. In regard to automated traffic enforcement, it's less than 1%. So, and the volumes of tickets issued are much greater on the automated traffic enforcement side. And then when it gets down to actual convictions, the conviction rate on automated traffic enforcement is up over 99.9%. So while there may be some particular circumstances that occasionally arise, and oftentimes those are due more to compassionate or some other grounds, the technical efficiency is well demonstrated at courts with automated traffic enforcement. The processing time for each violation is significantly reduced because the process is so heavily automated. Raw data captured from automated traffic enforcement equipment is often utilized. and can be expanded in different business analytics, such as traffic volumes, traffic counts, all those sorts of things. An intersection safety device can operate 24/7 with minimum maintenance required, meaning that you essentially have an enforcement presence at all hours of the day, where obviously the human resource component of that conventional enforcement is more challenging. And violators will only receive a registered owner violation ticket, which carries a monetary fine, whereas opposed to conventional violation tickets, they carry both fine and demerits. So although there's a greater volume of fines issued, those fines for the actual violator don't carry the they carry the same financial impact initially, but maybe not the same financial impact over the long run, given that demerits and violation tickets issued to an individual, not the registered owner, will have impacts on things such as your auto insurance. So when we look at the evaluations and results, so in the report, there was a table that showed the number of ATE offenses, both speed offenses and red light, stoplight offenses that were issued for those given years. There was an error in 2019. 2019 actually adds up to be 34,759, as opposed to what was previously indicated in the report. It was just didn't transfer over properly. But one of the interesting findings that we've seen is what we call a bit of the halo effect. So if you look at the graph, which has the ISD captured infractions at 100th Street and 132nd Avenue. Shane, is it possible to put that up on the screen?
Just 1 moment.
Well, so that is one of the first. So 100th Street and 132nd Avenue had for a long time been one of our highest injury collision locations in the city. Thanks, Shane. You'll see that when we launched it, it was the first site to get an intersection safety device installed, and this was for northbound 100th Street as it crossed through 132nd Avenue. So the camera was installed in June, so I kind of used June and July as a bit of a baseline, and I compared it to how June and July performed at that same intersection in 2017, 2018, and 2019. And you'll see the first 2 months in operation, the violations were extensive or substantial. In 2017, there was a significant decline, and those declines have continued basically up to last summer, where the number of incidents occurring there had declined significantly. Now, this is obviously a snapshot of one location. It's the one that we've had most consistent across the 5-year contract. We have had other installs that we've done, and because of construction projects and stuff, have removed the cameras for periods of time, put them back, or redeployed them to places that were more pressing concerns. So what we have seen, though, is that a similar thing. As soon as we install an intersection safety device, there's a huge spike at the onset representing what the current state was. And then what happens is it falls into a regular, more maintenance cycle, which is at that bottom end of the chart. So it will show that, you know, there may be 1,000 violations in a month, and then 6 months later, it's averaging out at 100, 150. So it certainly does reduce the incidents occurring at that particular spot, at that particular direction.
Can I?
So if we move down, Shane, if you could just scroll down to the collision statistics. So I had previously, just a little bit of caveat on the collision statistics. On some past reporting, I had some numbers for 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16 that had slightly different numbers in the number of overall damage collisions and stuff. that was because on those previous reports, I had included the hit and run data, but I didn't have hit and run data available for 29 and 2018, so I stripped that out. So the numbers that are in front of you from the RCMP Pro system for collisions, they represent consistent methodology for each of those years. So if you looked at one of the past reports and you saw that there was 420 injury collisions in 2012, that's because it included hit and runs, which this data doesn't have in there. And that's just so I could provide you an apples to apples comparison. But you'll see 2012, 13, and 14, which were the yellow highlighted years, show the problem we were facing, where we were seeing year over year, not little increases. We were seeing, most substantively, the volume of our overall collisions remained relatively the same. It was the injury collisions that were really concerning us, because those are the ones that were costing people real detrimental health outcomes, property loss, and so on. So that was where the concentration was, is what do we do about the injuries and the fatalities? So then comes the action plan. So 2015, 2016, we start seeing some inroads being made, actually pretty significant inroads in 2015, and in 2016 further. When it comes to injury collisions, we then kind of hit a bit of a maintenance cycle at this point, right? Where when we get down to 2017, 2018, 2019, it's fairly consistent from what we were seeing. So to get further substantive improvements, we know we're going to have to dig into the next iteration of Safe City Roads program and include some different tactics and strategies. But we did see a continued decline in the volume of our damage over 2,000 collisions, where, frankly, we had a fantastic year in 2019 in regard to our property damage collisions. So there's still good work being achieved there. And it's important to note that I heavily believe that on the traffic enforcement side, that if you let up on the enforcement, I mean, certainly you can vary your tactics and deploy your resources in different manners and at different intervals. But I think if you were just to pull back from traffic enforcement, it wouldn't be long before you see a rebound effect where, we don't have real fleshed out data, but anecdotally, during COVID, when we reduced the number of ATA, automated traffic enforcement hours in some of the zones we were in, we saw a 2 to 3-fold increase in the number of violations per hour on those same zones from prior to us pulling back the hours. So a combination of nice weather and less enforcement, you can certainly see that things can peak up a little bit. So we hope to have some more information about what transpired during our reduced hours, but unfortunately, we just don't have that data available at this point.
I just have a quick question on that, Director Manuel, if I may.
Yeah.
So is that a per hour, 2 to 3-fold increase on a per hour that, so that it's like per hour prior to, and do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I can tell you, I mean, I'd take it with a bit of a grain of salt right now because, like I said, I don't have the full analytical information to give you, but I can tell you that the same location, the same times of day during the same day a week is what we're looking at there, and we did see some 2 to 3-fold increases. Okay. And when I say violations per hour, that's not people being 10 kilometers over the speed limit. That's people over the automated traffic enforcement threshold, which is higher than 10 kilometers an hour.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just get down to next phases. So the reason we're having this meeting today is that the contract with Global concludes May 31st, 2020, and there is some renewal provision within that contract, and frankly, we have to have a discussion as to what the future of automated traffic enforcement looks like in Grande Prairie. There is a couple of things that may be affecting this decision for us. And that's obviously, despite the success of our local program, ATE is not always applied as effectively or as consistently across the province and other communities as it has been in Grande Prairie. And I don't think it comes as any surprise that there's local and provincial opposition that exists to automated traffic enforcement. People don't like giving the government money when they, if they believe they shouldn't have to, or it doesn't benefit them. So the province has, in the last 2 years, undertaken 2 separate reviews. So the NDP government did a review on ATE province-wide, had some recommendations that came forward, and the city was already compliant with that prior to them even putting it out. It was already practices we had in place. The second component, or second review, has then come about as part of the current government, the UCP's government's review of automated traffic enforcement, and they have put in a freeze on any new ATE technology or installations while they undertake their review. So it provides us with some limitations if we were to seek a alternative direction as far as implementing new technologies into our community or doing, again, new installations until that has concluded. So we do believe that there is opportunity to work with the vendor, which is Global Traffic, to address some of the concerns that will likely be raised here this morning with council, and have a direction moving forward that allows us to continue benefiting from the use of the automated traffic enforcement technology to improve traffic safety in the community, while also dealing with some of the community concerns or council concerns that may exist. We do believe that Global Traffic has, from an administration's perspective, demonstrated themselves to be a good partner. They've certainly been accommodating when we've asked them to make adjustments, and we believe that they've also been very effective and efficient with their operation. Their expertise is certainly noted in a lot of ways. When we kind of get down through the report a little bit further, this is an interesting one, is if you go to economic impact, if you can slide down to that there, Shane. So the city of Edmonton, along with Strathcona County, Leduc, and Fort Saskatchewan, St. Albert, they're part of a group called the Capital Region Intersection Safety Partnership, and they commissioned a report to assess the financial impacts of collisions. So back when we proposed the Safe City Roads program, we applied some of this analysis, the fatal collision. And so this is an Edmonton-based study with Edmonton costs, but we extrapolated ours probably wouldn't be a whole lot different. So using their numbers, you would see that based on where we were at in 2014, the direct costs of these collisions, these involve things like the property damage, the loss of productivity from the employee missing work, the insurance premiums, all those sorts of things, line up to, in 2014, we were looking somewhere in the range of $52 million. And in 2019, based on the reduction in collisions, that would be an annual cost of around $33 million. Still a very substantial cost, but if it was anywhere in the realm of the estimated annual cost savings to the community being $19 million, I would say that the investment made in this in these collision reductions has been well worth the effort so far. So I'll just get down to stakeholder engagement. So as far as renewal of the contract goes, there hasn't been direct community stakeholder engagement conducted by administration, but certainly over the past several years, administration has conducted significant levels of engagement regarding ATE, including public information sessions, social media, web posts, media articles, radio call-in shows, service club presentations, written reports. I mean, Bill and I went and visited the radio stations and took call-ins. Certainly, there's been no lack of engagement, and there's always ways to make some improvements in regard to that, and we're certainly willing to do this. And our vendor has actually done a lot of this work themselves too, where Global Traffic, if you're not aware, the city has a GIS application embedded on our website that shows where every single automated traffic enforcement zone in Grande Prairie is. And when you click on that zone, it shows the justification sheet filled out by the RCMP saying why that zone is a zone and what criteria it meets from the guidelines. And Global, frankly, did that at their cost without us even asking them. So they saw a need to do it and deployed it. So that was much appreciated. So I guess I'll get down to budget financial implications. So presently, the city, prior to expenses, collects on average just over $3 million of annual revenue in court fines from automated traffic enforcement. You'll see in 2018 that there is a difference between 18 and 19, and that's directly related to the mail strike. We lost a quarter of the revenue, or around a quarter of the revenue received in 2019 was actually generated in 2018, but delays in Canada Post affected when the funds were received. So one of the things to note here is that following budget 2020, the government of Alberta over the last 5 years has significantly increased their take on the amount of traffic fine revenue generated, to the point now where at one point they were collecting somewhere around 30, I believe it was 36% or somewhere in there, and now 58.01% of all traffic fine revenue, inclusive of the victim fine surcharge, goes to the province of Alberta. So they are by far the biggest benefit of this revenue. So in summary, administration's committed to reducing the number of motor vehicle collisions that result in injury and fatalities in our community. The ability to utilize all authorized technologies, including automated traffic enforcement, is necessary to ensure we have the right tools to address the specific circumstances in front of us. And we believe Global, again, has proven it to be efficient, effective, and flexible. We don't have any concerns with moving forward with them. I'll go to my recommendation then. And I do want to acknowledge that enforcement was only one aspect of the Safe City Roads Action Plan, and we are not by any way saying that automated traffic enforcement by itself has resulted in the collision reductions that we've seen. It really is and continues to be a multi-pronged approach where we have done various capital improvements at specific intersections and roadways. Additionally, we've redeployed our conventional resources to be in areas that are most problematic, as opposed to just a shotgun approach and just flock shooting. One of the biggest things that have come about in the last 5 years is our analytical capability. Our intelligence transportation system gives us much better traffic count information than we previously had. We have speed analyzers that tell us how quickly vehicles are traveling through particular areas. We have the Collision Reporting Center, which gives us, when we built the Safe City Roads Action Plan at first, we were using 3 to 5 year old data from collisions. Now we can get real-time collision data. So the analytical abilities we have are far superior than where they used to be, and those investments will help us pay dividends. We'll pay dividends as we try our new approaches to continue to improve the situation. But in front of us today is the direction we're moving with automated traffic enforcement. So my recommendation is the committee direct administration to exercise our contract renewal option for automated traffic enforcement services and negotiate the specifics of such with Global Traffic Group Limited. I know there's going to be a lot of questions now, and I'll be prepared for those. And I do want to note that I have Kelly Kokesh, the Enforcement Services Manager. He is online, and so is David Steer, the Chief Executive Officer for Global Traffic Group, and will all be available for their questions.
Okay, thanks, Director Manuel. So we'll do questions. Give me a show of hands who had some questions, and I'll try to make sure that I keep a queue. I see Councillor Plott, Councillor Bressie. So we'll start there. Councillor Plott, Councillor Thiessen afterwards.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. Thanks, Chris, for the report. Just, I guess, a couple questions for me. I'm just wondering if there's any, and it's outside of this, one of the things, I mean, I just nicely got one of these in the mail again, and, you know, that happens, and you're right, there is no bias on who gets it, but I guess what's disappointing to me is what comes with it. And I've always wondered why we don't take the opportunity. We have all this great data, all this great analytics, to spend another 11 cents to put another piece of paper in all these mail-outs, showing why we do it. I think there's a need in the community to actually educate people of the importance of traffic. I know it's totally changed my opinion on what we do with it, but it sure be nice to get some of that information going in these tickets. So as much as people are still going to be pissed off they got them, I wish that we had an educational option to show them why we're doing it. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to what that would look like, or if that's something maybe it's just me that has an appetite on. But I'm just wondering if that's something administration's looked at, or if we're going to have a chat about something like that.
Director Manuel?
Yeah, I certainly believe there's opportunity that exists to do something like that. Maybe I'll just go to David. Do you see any challenges if we were to look to do something like that?
Yes, good morning. In fact, there are zero challenges. A number of years ago around, you had mentioned the CRIS, so Capital Region Intersection Safety Partnership. They had us put an insert in every ticket that we sent out around the Capital Region, and we did that at no additional cost. In fact, I don't think I'm talking out of school. Strathcona County just last week did something very similar to what Councillor Platt is talking about. So they provide the document to us, and our equipment at our office. It is no difference. There's no additional mail cost. There's very little additional work on behalf of our staff to put that insert in. So it really is a community-based message of exactly the information that you want, and that is happening right now. And we would make that commitment that we're moving forward. We're happy to, and it can be changed up around start of school, for example, or it could be around your red light program, or around some of the things that Director Manuel was talking about in terms of some of that data around risk factors doing 30 kilometers an hour versus 50, 60, et cetera. So I hope that answers your question.
You bet. That would be great. And I'm not sure, I guess if that's something that will have a secondary conversation, or if that's just something administration will look at doing. So I'll leave it out with administration. I know it's for me, and I think it's important. And I'm seeing a few head shakes from council colleagues, especially if it's not going to cost us any money, or it's something we could prove to the community we could do. Just one other question, Mayor, given that then I'll turn it back. I have a few, but I'm sure some of these will come up from other people. But I'm just wondering when it comes to stop signs. A lot of complaints on just how aggressively we charge stop signs. I've had several lawyers say that we're choosing to charge the $387. We could choose to charge $144. I guess for me, if the appetite is there, I certainly don't think $387 for a rolling stop sign, especially when we've had some stop signs get changed to yield signs later on through analytics and through the stuff that Global's been working on in the city. So I'm just wondering if we're mandated to charge the absolute maximum, or if that is something council could have a conversation on why we're charging maybe 2.5 times what we need to be charging for those kind of violations.
Director Manuel?
So 2 points. So one, Councillor Plott, you're absolutely correct that at the start of this contract, we had a significant number of stop sign zones and a lot of infractions. After review of the analytics and discussions with the traffic engineering department, we've changed over dozens of stop signs to yield signs now. And we've even reduced the amount of stop sign enforcement we're conducting, and I think there's some discussion that will follow today about in the future having reduced that even further, if not completely. That being said, the decision to select the $388 fine is 100%. That's these are issued as provincial violation tickets, and the charge that's being referred to by these lawyers is one that several of them tried to present in court, and sometimes they'll get a sympathetic ear of a Crown prosecutor not looking to go to trial, where they'll present an alternative. But the appropriate charge is failure to stop at a stop sign. And for the failure to stop at a stop sign, there is only one charge and one fine amount. So I would say it's not a matter of us selecting the higher fine, it's us selecting the right charge, which is appropriate, and that's failure to stop at a stop sign, which carries only one fine.
So that'd be one of those examples of maybe great information that could go into that little one pager when you get a ticket about a stop sign, so it maybe stops some people upset. But appreciate the answers. I'll step out now and let somebody else have some time here. Thanks, Margaret.
Thanks, Councillor Platt. Then I have Councillor Bressie and then Councillor Thies.
So I've got a few questions. I'll give a couple, then maybe I'll let somebody else get in before I come back to my rest. But the big question for me is, as we're looking at automated enforcement contracting out versus if we brought it in-house, I recognize that if it got brought in-house, there'd be some significant upfront costs to that we'd maybe lose if the province changes rules. I also understand that it might be more expensive operationally than using a contractor. Are there other challenges in addition to the finances, though, that might not be as obvious if we brought it in-house? Just what's it look like if we did decide to go with an in-house option?
No, that's a fair question, and one I expected. So I can tell you that prior to us going with Global Traffic Group and going through the procurement process to identify them, we assessed the alternatives, and in the years leading up to Global Traffic Group taking the contract, we had done the automated traffic enforcement internally within Enforcement Services. And we had some lessons learned from that, which I'll share with you right now. So aside from cost, which is one of the points that you raised, the other concerns were effectiveness and efficiency. And what I mean by that is, for instance, when we're responsible for the equipment, we don't have because it's not a regular line of business, we don't know the ins and outs of the automated traffic enforcement equipment vendors. And with the vendors and the provincial requirements comes a need to do certification on the equipment on a regular basis. And we had significant challenges qualifying people to be certified calibrators of the equipment. And following that, so we had calibration issues. We had real problems training operators because it's not a matter of just hiring them and putting them out on the road. You have to hire them. Once you hire them, you have to train them to the provincial standards. And that training is not readily available. You have to develop some in-house expertise to do that. And then what we also found is that when people were working directly for us, as other opportunities within Enforcement Services came up, such as a bylaw enforcement officer job that might pay a few dollars an hour more, we would then lose the employee that we just trained to do automated traffic enforcement for the last 6 months as they move up into another position within the department, creating a vacancy in the role they just left. And we had a real challenge keeping the seats filled in the automated traffic enforcement vehicles. And because it's not something, a line of work that our supervisors had previously been involved with, it makes mentorship and training rather challenging compared to where Global, they're performing this duty across the province, frankly, across other jurisdictions of Canada as well. They have the benefit of scale. All of their back office work, for instance, where the violations are all processed, is all done through a centralized facility down outside of Edmonton, where they're providing support to multiple communities opposed to just us. So we found that both from an administrative perspective, from putting staff in vehicles, and then oversight of the program at an operational level, it was just more effective and more efficient to utilize Global.
Great. Then I've got a few more questions, but maybe I'll ask you to come back.
Okay, sure. So I've got Councillor Thiessen, then Councillor Clayton.
Thank you very much, Mayor Given, and thank you for the report, Chris. Just a couple questions. I have a bunch of questions as well, but I'll leave it to a couple that have already been asked just to get a fuller understanding of it. So in the report, it says that if we were to renegotiate a new deal and have the renewal with Global Traffic Group, that we would be suspending the aspect of the ATE program involving stop sign enforcement. Now, Councillor Platt mentioned it, but I also get a lot of complaints about stop sign enforcement, the 3-second rule, and all that. Is that our direction if we renew this contract to no longer get Global Traffic to do our stop sign enforcement?
So I do believe that there's a requirement to do stop sign enforcement, but I also believe that in most circumstances, our conventional resources can identify the problem locations and address that. So I think we would look to refine stop signs down to the only criteria I think we could probably permit them or recommend permitting them would be in locations where conventional stop sign enforcement is just not safe to do. So that would be a very small, like that wouldn't include like your neighborhood pulling out of your subdivision onto a collector or even basic arterial road, right? And I think for most places where safety would really be a concern for conventional enforcement, it's likely a controlled intersection by traffic lights and not a stop sign. So I think for, I would say 99% of circumstances, we would be looking to move away from stop sign as it exists.
Okay, thank you for that. Just another question just to top up on that. So in 2019, we had 4,485 AT stop red light offenses. Do we have any idea what the percentage of stop sign offenses were in that in those stats? I understand if you don't have that readily, but maybe a best guess.
You're correct. I don't have it readily. It would be a significant portion, though.
Oh, okay. So,
Kelly, would you have any more insight in that? But I think it would be fairly high, like above 80, likely.
Oh, 80. Okay. Okay, that's good to know. And finally, just my last question. I do have more, but I'll leave it at this. In regards to the contract and also what Dylan had asked about our capacity to bring this in-house, what we make off of the ticket revenue, I guess, we give so much back to the province, we take so much. Based off of the contract, does that make this a revenue neutral exercise, or is there still revenue that we generate after the province takes their 58% share?
No, that's a fair comment. So over the years, we have significantly reduced how much revenue above costs was allocated to the city's base budget. But I can tell you that as of this morning, it's about $1.1 million over costs that essentially offsets what would otherwise require tax requisition. So right now, automated traffic enforcement revenues directly offset expenditures within enforcement services budget. So enforcement services with this plus other revenues within their budget is actually a net contributor to the city, in that enforcement services carries no cost after accounting for the revenues within their budget. So if this was pulled out, like we stopped doing automated traffic enforcement today, there would be approximately a $1.1 million budget shortfall within the base budget.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Clayton?
Thanks, Mayor Given. My questions are fairly specific to the contract renewal, and so I'll try to keep them at a high level, understanding that it's a legal agreement, et cetera. But I'm curious, Director Manuel, the contract itself, as it stands today, based on what we've seen in regards of the utilization of what we were hoping the enforcement service would achieve. Are there any changes that you would want to put forward in this contract, and if so, is that a possibility, or what does the renewal look like on a contract sort of situation?
Okay, so I think what we're looking to do with contract renewal and would essentially, we were looking for a 3-year term, and the reason I suggested a 3-year term is we've actually added a couple of the intersection safety devices in the last couple of years, meaning that although they were authorized for 10 back in 2015, there was various challenges that emerged, some of it with intersection construction and utility issues and those sorts of things that delayed installations of some of those pieces of equipment up until the last couple of years. And there's a fairly significant capital outlay required by global traffic to procure that equipment. And the return on investment, you know, to not take the loss on that equipment required a few pieces of those intersection safety devices, the red light cameras, to fall outside of the regular term. So the longest continuation of those pieces of equipment would be about another 3 years. So we've deemed it prudent for 2 reasons to suggest 3 years. You know, certainly it's something that's negotiable, but we saw 3 years as bringing all the equipment back into alignment with the same term. And the second thing is it would also provide the next council the opportunity to really make a decision, an informed decision, having understood the particulars of how the contract is operating at that time, to see how they would like to proceed. As far as the number of hours, so making adjustments around things like the stop sign component, how many hours, the number of zones is always subject to the RCMP. So there's been a significant, we've reduced hundreds of zones. I think at one point the city, when we controlled automated traffic enforcement ourselves, had over 380 zones in the city. And if you think about it, if you include all the playgrounds and school zones, there's a lot of playgrounds and school zones in the city right there, right? So if every one of those is a zone, there's going to be quite a few. So outside of playground zones and school zones, we've really narrowed down where global can actually work. And it is more correlated, or should be directly correlated to where the problems and collisions exist. And we continue to monitor that piece. As far as other specifics, I think some of the things like what Councillor Plot identified, can we do mail outs? I know there's going to be some discussion around some more, some high visibility vehicles and those sorts of things. I think we can take what we gather here today and go away and have those conversations. I am a little sensitive to trying to negotiate with Dave via Zoom at a council committee of the whole meeting, but I would like to, and I think one of the benefits we have and one of the reasons we selected today for the CCW is I think there's 2 more opportunities to get back before council prior to the conclusion of this term, right? So I think we can start having these conversations following the information we gathered today, and then move forward with some, I see Dave wants to come in.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to exit the conversation at any time, and if there's any specific or sensitive questions that you guys would be happier chatting amongst yourselves with, I understand. I think many of you there, especially Clyde, understand that a million years ago I was a councillor as well and a school board trustee, etc. So I do get it. I do have some people standing by back in the office just to answer any technical questions that may come up. And so I did ask the question around, I think that the mayor had asked in terms of the percentage. So that percentage, they did a quick calculation for you. So it is, I think you were asking in 2019, the percentage of red light versus stop sign. So it was 41% red light versus 59% stop sign. And I just wanted to give a little bit of an explanation for everybody there, more of an education perhaps, that the big things and how some of this technology works. So the law in Alberta currently for automated traffic enforcement, as Director Manuel had said, Really a stop violation, the $388, that is or was the price. And there's only 3 types of tickets that an ATE peace officer can issue, and that is for speed, for a stop sign, and for a red light. So for example, if we do see somebody on their cell phone, we are not allowed to send that ticket out in the mail. So there are a number of other things. So I think as Councillor Clayton had asked, just from our perspective, and I think as Director Manuel had said, that we do see the numbers of the $2,000 property damage continue to go down, but the injury acts is kind of plateaued there. And so some of the things that we're seeing from, over 15 years, 17 years ago when we started, cell phones weren't as prevalent, and we're really seeing that now. So some of the things that we're doing in the background, just even to go out there into another level, we do a lot of research and development in-house with international providers. So as many companies step up during COVID and ask, what can we do? So we've been doing some really interesting things around distracted driving, and we think that how can you take this program to a next level? And it doesn't matter whether it's global or your peace officers or the RCMP, but it's definitely something that we think is if you're trying to get to a vision zero where there's 0 fatalities, 0 injuries, the cell phones have to go. It's just such a huge problem out there. We're not allowed to issue that ticket right now. So one of the things that we do, we're working on a distracted driving program. There's also a no insurance. I know Director Manuel had talked about the hit and run side of things. So there's something there that we're working very closely with a number of different partners and really across Canada. Because it's such a huge issue where people are driving around without insurance, and then there's other risk factors there as well. But there's some really interesting things when you look at lasers and virus and cameras, and we are dealing with lasers and cameras. So just like somebody with a breathalyzer for alcohol, can you have something similar? And there was a gentleman out of England a year ago that won a huge prize because he was detecting viruses with a laser. So yes, even though we're in the traffic enforcement, we're on the cutting edge of a lot of different things. So we're actually working with a university in Europe right now to see, can we use some of our machine learning and very highly sensitive cameras and lasers to see if there's things like that. So these are some of the things that we work on. And just as a final comment, in terms of a stop, so whether it's a stop sign or a red light violation, somebody turning right or going straight through on a red light, I guess it would be the right turn on red. There is no restriction in law in Alberta in terms of a 3-second rule. It really is, did you stop or not? And about 10 years ago, when we started doing stop sign violations, we hooked up a laser to that, and the Crown prosecutors ultimately asked us to remove that from the technology because they said the video stands on its own merits now. So, but that gave us the insight into looking at how fast are these vehicles going. So when we look at a vehicle going through a stop sign and a rolling stop at 1 kilometer an hour, it is so slow you'd have to get out your magnifying glass and pause and be in court, etc. So what it really gave us was the opportunity to see this rolling stop, what kind of a ticket are we issuing? And the number is about 7 kilometers an hour. So for a judge to see it in court and a trained operator in the office looking at a stop violation, typically a 5 kilometer, 4 kilometer violation does not go out in the mail. And just like everybody knows, if you're doing 51 kilometers an hour in a 50 zone, we're not issuing you a ticket. There's a trigger speed there or a tolerance that the RCMP set. And that's kind of the operational tolerance in our office with the stop sign. So 2 things there is, one, something that is going out as a rolling stop, they're doing approximately 7 kilometers an hour or more. And there is no 3-second rule in Alberta, as long as the vehicle comes to a stop and make sure it's clearest to go away they go. I hope that clarifies. Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor Given, is it okay if I finish what I was?
Yeah, sure, Councillor Clayton, and then we'll go to Councillor O'Toole.
Thanks. So I didn't really get to what I was hoping to get to from that question, so I'll try again. And I totally appreciate some of the earlier comments in regards to communication with people that not only received the tickets. I've always supported the community safety initiative. I believe that if you that we have enough parameters for forgiveness on people that are going slightly over a speed limit, et cetera. So if you get a ticket, and I've received many, that you are breaking the law and therefore you should pay. So I'm a big advocate for community safety initiative. I do think there's opportunities in this contract though, communication being one of them, not only in the mail with your ticket, but I think last term or at the beginning of this term, we talked about outward communication from the city as well, whether it's our website or own personal messaging, on whatever that means to talk about the results from our community safety initiative. When you have those conversations with people, although they're still upset that they are paying a ticket, they understand the justification of the money and that we're not building swimming pools with it, and that there may be situations across the province and other communities that it's being utilized in what I believe is probably not the outcome that communities want. I truly believe that we're getting the outcomes from what this initiative set forward. My bigger questions now are with the contract specifically. And so I'm not a person that just wants to continue to renew things. I think that anytime there's an opportunity for renewal, it also creates an opportunity to look at what could be better out of that arrangement and what the opportunities are for the organization such as us who is hiring the firm. So through the assessment of that agreement, you know, is there opportunities for us to work with the provincial government and lobby for a bigger share of the money? Is there opportunities for us to internally manage the contract better? I do believe that Global's done a very good job of being adaptive to what we've said. So when council has gone to protective services and said, you know, we're hearing this, we're seeing this, yada, yada, Global's been very responsive to the demands and the needs of the city and being flexible to achieve what we wanted to achieve. I just don't want to miss this opportunity on a contract renewal for us to dig deeper and make sure that there isn't other opportunities that benefit the city better. So thank you.
So Councillor Clayton, you said you missed your answer to your question, and
yeah,
I'm not 100% I heard a question there.
I think that Director Manuel gets what I'm getting at. I don't want to talk about specifics of a contract right now. I just wanted to make sure that here's the question. Director Manuel, have you utilized your opportunity for looking into this contract to achieve the best goals that you think are, the optimate goals that you think are best for the city?
So, yeah, to respond, I think it's my intent to take the feedback I collect here today. I think at a personal level, I understand a lot of the things that various councillors would like to see. I think I'm going to hear those publicly today is what I'm hearing. A number of these things are what those positions are anyways. And I'm hoping that following this meeting here today, I have some direction to go back to David with and have a discussion on how we can to see if we can come to a mutual agreement on how we move forward, taking in all those considerations into play.
Councillor O'Toole? Your microphone, Councillor O'Toole. No, Councillor O'Toole, we can't hear you. I've got you next in the queue, but we can't hear you. It looks like you're on mute. Oh, you can't see the meeting? Okay, so we can all see you and we can't hear you. So can you hear that? You can hear the meeting though. Okay, so you can see you say you can't hear the meeting. If you have any questions, can you use the chat function? Okay, so if you had any, no? Okay. So Councillor O'Toole, I'm sorry, we don't have anybody there with you right now, and I'm not sure exactly
maybe to call back in and try another connection.
Yeah, why don't you hang up and call back in? Okay. Thanks for that heads up, Councillor O'Toole. Other questions? Yeah, Councillor Minhas and then Councillor Bressie. Councillor Minhas?
Thank you very much. My question is to Chris, like with this contract, like when you go, I'm not sure we pay the percentage to them or is the fixed cost for monthly base? And like example, he was saying provincially gone up to 58% of the revenue. So if it's monthly, if the provincial go to 62% next year, how we manage that, if it's percentage, then how we manage that to bring up the revenue to 1.1 million, what he's saying earlier.
Director Manuel?
Okay, so you're correct. So presently, the way that remuneration works for Global is on a negotiated percentage of convicted fines once paid by the violator. So meaning they've gone through the court process, they've withstood scrutiny there, or haven't been contested, and ultimately somebody has paid the fine. At that point, both the city receives their percentage, the province gets theirs, and Global will get reimbursed for their work and investment. That being said, there is alternative models, one of which you mentioned, where there is fixed contract pricing that's not tied to specific performance. At times, that's not something we've ever discussed with Global, but if there's a direction to do that, we could explore it. But at this point, it is based off the percentage of violations. And you bring up an interesting point when it comes to changes the province is making. It's kind of new realm for us the last couple of years. They hadn't really made too many changes in the past. So our contract is pretty much silent on it, I believe, right now. But that is a discussion that moving forward we'll have to have with Global.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Minhas. And then I think I had Councillor Bressie, Councillor Plott, and then Councillor Thiessen. I think I saw your hand, right, Councillor Thiessen? Okay.
Great, thank you. I think the last question that I'm going to be asking is just about staff resources we have dedicated towards automated enforcement in terms of this program that's obviously really important for safety, which is one of our top priorities. It's an important program for us. It's a program that, as all of us councillors are well aware, is very important in public consciousness, and whether people are for or against it, they're passionate about it. It's also something that's a net revenue of us of over $1 million and gross revenues of $6 or $7 million. It's also just financially a significant program. Curious, what kind of staff resources do we have dedicated towards monitoring the contract, making sure that what we're asking for is being fulfilled and not being overstepped or understepped, responding to public concerns when they come up? Just what do our staff resources put into this look like?
Okay, thank you. That's a good question. So what I can say is that we do not have dedicated resourcing towards automated traffic enforcement from a city perspective. Ultimately, oversight of the program began with myself when I was the enforcement services manager. And, you know, frankly, the only reason I'm probably speaking here today is even though I'm the director, I was pretty instrumental to the founding of this initiative and this program. So from a continuity perspective, it made sense for me to speak to it. But moving forward, Kelly Kokash is the current enforcement services manager, and he has certainly taken on the role of the day-to-day oversight. That being said, Kelly does not have an allocated resource to this project. It's something that sits on the side of his and on the side of Sean Hebert, his operational support supervisor's desk. So I think they do a good job. Global Traffic has a local manager, which provides regular contact and brings forward kind of concerns to Kelly and his team. And they do a good job from that way. But if we're really looking to get aggressive on how we action some of these communication items, we get really into the details as to weekly deployments and assessing those. Certainly some additional resourcing or reallocation of resourcing would likely be required. Global does provide a monthly report, an official monthly report to the city, and as well as they do put together a quarterly and annual report as well. So those are available. So we provide effective oversight at a high level right now, but certainly to achieve some of the things that may be desired by council, we could utilize likely some more specific resourcing in that area.
Thank you.
Councillor, I think I had Councillor Plott, then Councillor Thiessen, then Councillor Friesen.
Thanks, Mayor Gibbon. We chatted a little bit about with the stop, and I just want to see if there is clarification if this is something with the stop signs. I just want to clarify that, are we looking at taking these 100% in-house, or would Global still be doing some of the stop signs?
Okay.
Director Manuel?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Plott. I actually got a text while I was presenting here, and Kelly Kokash advised me that we only have 13 remaining stop sign zones. So meaning they've been pared down by the dozens. I'm a little hesitant to say, without having a quick conversation with Kelly, that we would 100% move away from all of it, because I do think there might be a couple locations where, even though we would want to do conventional enforcement, we just couldn't do it there. But I don't know that for sure off the top of my head. So the intent is to significantly reduce from where we were. And when Mr. Steer advised us of those current stats from 2019, comparing red lights to stop signs, that actually does reflect a shift from where we previously were. I do think in years past, we were a much higher percentage of stop signs, but that does speak to how they've redeployed the resources and the zones, and ultimately people's compliance as well. We did see significant uptake in compliance on stop signs following Global's actions.
Okay. And just to kind of further, thanks for that, Director Manuel, and just further, if we're going to do some kind of mail-outs, we talk about how we determine these accident areas. I get a lot of pushback on 116th Street specifically. I know I'm getting a little bit in the weeds on this, but specifically on 116th Street of why that's not a 70 zone when it's a 4-lane, controlled intersections, we put up lights. So I am a little bit worried if we did put stuff like a piece of paper in the mail or take it as much as I want to, with an area like that where I guess constantly get told like nobody's ever seen an accident, we don't know why. I don't know how we layer that in. Maybe I'm just kind of curious to see if we do an educational piece, how we make sure that when we're targeting areas like 116th Street, we can justify the amount of tickets that may be coming out of that area with accidents or data for that.
And that's a fair point. One thing I'll reiterate is that enforcement in Global, we certainly don't make speed limits or design roads. So we have a close relationship with the traffic engineering department that is responsible for those things. And there has been times where we use the data we're collecting from enforcement around non-compliance to challenge whether it's appropriately controlled, so whether a stop sign would be, I mean, that was really the catalyst behind changing stop signs. We'd probably still have dozens of stop signs that should have been yield signs if it wasn't for the fact that we started to see trends where people were getting tickets and we're asking why, and that led to conversations. And we do the same with speed. A prime example of that is the 50-kilometer-hour speed limit going through the bridges across Muskogee Park on 100th and 99th. So we've had a lot of dialogue about that, and when the rationale is actually put forward, it makes some sense, but you need to have that conversation with people for it to make sense. So I appreciate where you're coming from, Councillor, and I think we could do some work on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I think I had Councillor Thiessen, then Councillor Friesen.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Given, and thanks again, Chris, for everything. I guess my question is just in regards to the province and the review of automated traffic enforcement. The Premier has been very open on his position and the party's position that they don't, they're not in favor of predatory ticketing practices of automated traffic enforcement, and that's part of their review. Do we know where they're at with that review currently? And what if we renew this contract, would we build in the flexibility on location and methods of ticketing as well? Or is that something we can layer into a contract?
Okay, so the first part, as far as where the review's at, I believe that COVID has likely delayed the progress they were making on that. I know they had met with stakeholders already and collected a fair bit of information. All the signaling that we've got so far indicates that the program will continue. They've been very clear to us that the city of Grande Prairie has never been their target. I don't know which specific communities, but they had indicated to us that there is some smaller communities in the province where up to 50% of the revenue that was being obtained in the community was coming from ATE-related activities, where in Grande Prairie, that's less than 1%, right? So we're not even close. So those are some of the challenges that they're trying to tackle, and it's tough to say, you know, when the only device you put on a road is on the 4-lane, multi-lane highway, and you don't do anything in your community, that's where some of these challenges kind of come into play. So I think when there's a demonstrated need and demonstrated effectiveness, I think we're going to be pretty safe. And I think in Grande Prairie, we're doing it the right way.
Yeah, sorry, Chris.
The second part, Chris, was just around whether we could build something in. I think we can. We're going to have to really think about what that looks like. I know presently Global initially assumed a fair bit of risk when they signed the contract that exists today, because they're basically responsible for everything. Moving forward, I think we'll have some considerations. One of the advantages behind moving forward with our existing vendor is there's not the need to make that initial capital investment that was required at the onset of a contract, right? So if we continue with the equipment and the resourcing that we have, it's not like you're adding significant additional capital investment, which probably makes both of our risk a little lower.
Okay, thanks for that, Chris. If I may, Mayor Given, just a couple questions off of that. So in regards to, I guess my biggest concern is that whenever the province hands out an edict or makes a new policy or law, it affects everything across the province wholesale. So yeah, my concern is that if they were to do that, and then we'd see significant, changes to whatever the contract that we've already signed would be. I guess that's part of my concern, and I'll just state it at that. I guess finally, just on the question of the contract, so you're recommending a potential 3-year renewal. Why not 1 and see how the province does on this review? 1 year, I mean. So.
Frankly, I'm willing. I think typically from a planning perspective, it's a little bit easier. I think my general approach would be to pursue the longer-term stability, but have a mechanism to address the short-term instability that might occur. So as long as we have those relief valves that you're mentioning before, that if something changes, we have to make sure that both us and Global can respond to those changes. And one of the things that I relayed in my report is the flexibility that Global has demonstrated to us so far has been rather exceptional, and I don't have a reason to believe that would change at this point. But it is well understood. Certainly, I just needed a start point to have a discussion with council. 3 years did align with a couple of those intersection safety devices that we had outside of the contract term already. So it just put everything in alignment with, but I'm open to feedback.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Just, and Councillor Friesen, I've got you next, but just, I'd also say on that point about, why 1 year or anything else, I'd suggest that it might be worthwhile to, have this cross in, as the director said, into the next council term, so the next council can get started, get thinking about it, understand the program, and then make some decisions about it that are informed, rather than putting a contract renewal like this immediately preceding municipal election. Would be another reason why I would say probably not the ideal thing to be coming up in May, June of 2021. Just a thought. Councillor Friesen?
Thank you, Mayor Given. So this question is for either Director Manuel or Mr. Steer. You may have an answer to this as well. One of the things that I hear almost as often as anything else is the gotcha kind of, hiding and that sort of thing. And some people suggest that making the vehicle more visible or in some other way flagging ahead that it's coming. So I understand how this contributes to safety at the moment because someone may notice and slow down. Others would not and get the ticket anyway. But I do wonder, in your experience, maybe Mr. Steer, if other communities have done this and what has the impact been on the program as a whole and potentially on safety for the person sitting in the very obvious vehicle. Not that we don't know what those black trucks are anyway, but is there any merit to doing that, or should we rather stay potentially with what we've got?
David?
So I'll first go to Director Manuel and then let David supplement it.
Okay. So, Councillor, it is something that we've seen as an approach taken in other places. Edmonton's probably the most recent one, but I will let David speak to their experience in other communities. It should be noted, though, that even in Edmonton, it's not their entire fleet that's marked high visibility. They have a handful of vehicles that are marked high visibility for that purpose. But, the last time I was in Edmonton, I still saw one of those parked up on top of an overpass shooting a multi-lane highway down below. So, I mean, it was still, although it was fluorescent yellow, it was still kind of up on an overpass and whatnot. So it all depends how you deploy them. If you have it highly visible, but you hide it in a bush, you kind of defeat that purpose a little bit. But I'll let David speak to their experience, and there may be room for some combination.
Thank you, Director Manuel. So essentially, the way that we look at it is two terms, overt versus covert. And a great example would be the RCMP. And everybody knows, so Councillor Friesen, some people, when they're speeding, they see the black truck on the side of the road, they hit their brakes, and then 200 meters further down the road, they speed up. Same sort of scenario, perhaps, with the RCMP with that type of driver. So we're talking about a certain, some people are doing the limit, they've learned the lesson, or since they got their driver's license, this is how they drive. But other people are playing the game, and so then, okay, I see the photo enforcement, I slow down, and then I speed up. And really, that's counter to the collision. So you're not going to know when a collision is going to happen, so you need to be doing the speed limit or following the rules of the road all the time. So this is why the RCMP might have slicks or ghost cars, et cetera, because sometimes, when they're, and I've heard that from RCMP officers or, very high-ranking RCMP officers, when they're in their cruiser, everybody around them is driving like an angel. But as soon as they jump in their personal vehicle, they could even be in their own unit and still in uniform, but they're driving home and they see all of these flagrant violations on the road. And those are the accident. And unfortunately, you can't have the police and the marked vehicles everywhere all the time. So there is that balance. So that's why we don't look at it as a gotcha kind of scenario. We look at truly as being very overt. And so sometimes if we're in a construction zone or in September when we're in a school zone, we don't want to issue any tickets. We want to be as overt as possible. So every mom and every dad coming into the school zone in September, they understand, okay, here's photo enforcement. They're parked differently today. They're being very overt. But there's other times where, okay, it's time to have both sides of the combination where it's like, if people are speeding on this road at this time, then they need to get the message. They haven't seen the signs, or they haven't. So for whatever reason, they're not following the law. So there are those two different strategies. And in terms of marked vehicles, I've seen it for sure in Edmonton, definitely, I think 20 years ago in Europe. And it really does lend that sort of scenario where if you put those parameters in place, where all vehicles must be marked all the time and be fluorescent, green or neon orange or something like that, then it does take away from and you do see that where vehicles speed up immediately. Where I really do like it is in construction zones and some school zones where you don't, if somebody's speeding through a construction zone and there's workers out there doing their thing, you don't want to issue any photo enforcement tickets. You want to be extremely overt. You want people to slow down because it's a very, very high risk area. And you don't want the result. You don't want the collision or the accident. And you want everybody to see you and know. So I'm definitely in support of some combination of overt enforcement and covert enforcement.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I agree with David. I think that's one of the messages that we've seen as well, Councillor, where we could probably introduce some more overt measures as well. And additionally, one of the things I should note that I didn't in my presentation is a lot of the zones that we actually deploy global to, understanding that they're a company whose remuneration, who they cover their bills based off a percentage of the violations. Many of the zones that we send them to, school zones and playground zones particularly, are at a loss, right? They're there because we told them we need them to be there, and they don't give us any grief about being there. But, certainly if it was about generating revenue for the city or generating revenue for the contractor, there's a handful of places we could go, and frankly, we probably wouldn't need property taxes. But that's not the intent of the program, and David's team doesn't provide any pushback when we send them to these areas that we know we just need representation, but fiscally don't meet the mark.
So Director Manuel, I just wanted to follow up. This is, I think, what Councillor Thiessen was asking, and I just want to make sure that I heard the answer really directly. So what are the, under any renewal, is there any liability to the city should the province cancel photo enforcement, province-wide? Like, does the city would we be subject to any liability to global if the province canceled the program fully, or is that sort of okay, it's over and there's no sort of cost to the city?
So, to be fair, David and I have had no conversation at this point as to what renewal terms exactly look like. I think that's where I have to leave it right now. It would be subject to that renewal term. So I would have to come back to council before moving forward with that answer.
Okay, well, so that would be something for me, as we start to think about things that we might want to highlight if we're going to be asking administration to renew the contract subject to some certain terms or some other things, enhancements that we want to see. That would be one, is that there's some protection for the city should the province choose to change the program. Obviously that's, that's outside of the city's control, outside of Global's control. But I would want to ensure that the city is protected from any liability under provincial action. I think it's unlikely that the province would cancel the program wholesale, but I just would want to make sure that any renewal had an acknowledgement of the fact that we're not in control of that and cover that liability.
I should note, I just got a note saying there is a termination clause in the current contract that covers that provision, so we'd be looking to move forward with it.
So we are covered there. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Councillor Thiessen?
Yeah, thank you very much, Bill. I actually wasn't leaning for that. That was a great question. I was just leaning towards potential program changes and how that may impact the scope or details of the project, or how they can go about enforcing tickets. I guess the only thing I want to say here is just a comment, and back to that education piece. Chris, I really appreciated the economic impact study that you, or table, I guess, that you included based off of the CRIS model in the capital region area. One thing I did note, though, is that it's a bit out of date. It's about 10 years old as far as 2019 to 2010. So I just did a cost of living adjustment. In total, increased the cost of total savings to the public from accidents or injury by about $5 million. One thing I would push back on is property collision, especially in the Grande Prairie context, considering that if you look at the roads, we probably have more trucks, SUVs, and vans on our roads rather than cars. And I think cars are more predominant, as well as an efficient transit system in the capital region area of Edmonton and of Calgary. So I think that's just a slight specification. Maybe if there's a way we can figure out to modify that. But I really like that opportunity that we have as you're presenting it to council of potentially educating the public and showing them, yes, this isn't a cash cow, but look how much we save everybody in general. And attaching that dollar value to savings and to lives and saving lives, I think could be very beneficial in that education process. So if we're going to end up adding those mailouts, which I'm totally in agreement of, if we continue this contract and renew it, I would look for something like that to engage the public with as well. Thank you.
So as we're kind of, maybe not exactly at the end, but just as we're going through and have had an opportunity for questions, as we get on to business arising, if I'll make a recommendation to council. You know, administration needs to know whether council wants them to go forward with negotiating an extension or other term of the contract or not. So that's the main part. I'd suggest that if we are going to ask administration to negotiate an extension, that we may want to do, you know, something along the lines of council direct administration negotiate an extension of the contract for X period of time, and allow for the following inclusions in that contract. You know, so we may just want to give the administration some direction via motion, so we can be on the record of what types of things we would like to have considered in that contract extension or renegotiation. So just sort of give that, so, you know, I think people have some ideas. We've heard a couple of specifics, and so maybe if we could, unless there are any other questions, we could move on to discussion and debate. We do need to have some sort of direction to move this forward, and then we can debate that motion and add those, what types of considerations would we want administration to take with them as they go into contract discussions. So is there anybody that's willing to make a motion to get this started? Councillor Thiessen?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Mayor Given. I will make the motion. I would move that committee direct council or committee advise council to direct administration to exercise our contract renewal option for automated traffic enforcement services and negotiate the specifics as such with Global Traffic Group Limited, including an education piece with ticket mailouts. If that's specific enough, I guess we can fit an educational component with the ticket mailouts. And I guess in that motion, I can take out recommend to council, because I imagine that we're doing that anyways here as a council committee of the whole, or would we do touch up on this business later as well for?
Sorry, see Councillor Bressie. So I think we would be giving direction to administration as committee. Administration would bring back, I'm looking at Director Manuel, administration would bring back that renewal for ultimate council approval. Is that sort of what this was built on?
Yeah, so essentially, I know there were some different perspectives around this, so I was just looking for looking for something to bring forward to just make sure I'm on the right page. And yes, we'll return back prior to ratifying anything.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So this is the committee directing administration to go and do some work, and what the bounds of that work is or will be, and then once that work is concluded, they would return back to council for formal approval of the contract. I see Councillor O'Toole. So we do have a motion now. Councillor O'Toole.
Yeah, I'm fully supportive of the motion that was made. I was just wondering if we want to include a term at this point, or we wait for later on when we get the report back from Mr. Manuel. That certainly is something we could, if we wanted to give administration, again, help them understand what sort of the bounds of our direction are. That absolutely could be something that we could have in the motion. Councillor Thiessen didn't put it in, but we absolutely could have it in. So if anybody wanted to make an amendment, and I'm okay, I think if we do a few amendments, we'll just deal with each one. Let's not make an amendment on amendment, but if we want to do one amendment and then another one and then another one, that's fine to add different things. Then maybe let's deal with it that way. But so at this stage, it doesn't have the term. Councillor O'Toole, did you have something on that? Yeah, I was just going to ask Mr. Manuel if he had a recommendation for other reasons than what maybe we're privy to,
what he would suggest is a term.
Director Manuel?
My recommendation for term is 3 years. I think 3 years will bring us into alignment with the 2 or 3 intersections we have that are outside of this 5-year cycle, which brings everything into a nice package. And additionally, I think it does provide the next council an opportunity to get an understanding of the program prior to having to make the decision on the future of it. And it also, one of the things that I want to emphasize is that the next phase of our Safe City Roads plan, aside from just automated traffic enforcement, is I just talked up all that analytics we had. Because we didn't have that at the beginning of this, we had to shoestring together some benchmarks to show whether there was success. What we have now is we're going to be able to really drill it down to like a per zone level to show if we've identified zones, we can apply what's traffic volumes in those zones as a baseline today. And we'll probably do some controlled sites where we have no interventions utilizing automated traffic enforcement. We'll do some that are conventional only. We'll do some that we're going to create a much better package for you to see the effectiveness and in what scenarios come 3 years' time, what's working well and why we should proceed based off actual hard data per zone, which we just didn't have available for you in this term.
Okay, Councillor O'Toole?
Yes, that's what I thought you said earlier in your report, and I would just like to make that recommendation that we amend the motion to include a 3-year timeline, a 3-year contract.
Okay, so the motion from Councillor O'Toole is to amend Councillor Thiessen's motion to include the specifics of council directing administration to negotiate a 3-year term on the renewal. Any discussion or debate on the amendment? And so we'll deal with the amendment, and again, we'll maybe have some others, and then we'll just build a motion that has all the stuff we want in it this way. Councillor Bressie and then Councillor Palat.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I can't support this. For me, 2 years would be more reasonable, and I understand the risks that get taken on with entering a contract with uncertainty and the convenience of VTEL line equipment. But in my mind, photo radar is a pretty contentious issue that's likely to be issued during the next election, and I think that it's fair to the next council to let them to be able to enter this discussion earlier in their term. And I think giving them 6 months to get up to speed, understand city processes, and get a better understanding of our traffic is very reasonable. But I think 1.5 years is a frustratingly long time to potentially make them late. So for me, I can't support this. If this motion fails, then I support a 2-year motion.
Thanks, Councillor Bressie. Councillor Palat.
Thanks, Mayor Grimm. I'm exactly the same as Dylan on this. I think 2 years still gives us a good enough time. What I do like to Councillor Bressie's point is it gives the new council 6 months to get kind of their wings under them, hear what the community has, see where photo enforcement is at that point, or automated traffic enforcement is at that point. But I think 3 years right now for me, it's just too long of a contract. I think there's too many things that could change in this, and I don't see how that would hurt the city to do a 2-year versus a 3 year. So yeah, I couldn't support it. I'd be looking for the rest of council on this, but I wouldn't. I'd be looking to amend that.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Platt. And so we won't have, because this is an amendment to the main motion, we won't have an amendment to the amendment. But so, vote it up, vote it down, and then if there's a different term, if it didn't pass, then somebody can make that motion on a different term. Councillor Blackburn, you had your hand up previously. Was it on this point or was it on something else?
I'll wait till we get back to debating the main motion. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, so I'll say, I'll just enter, I don't see any other hands, I don't think, on the amendment. I'll say that I do support the 3-year term. I think if we all reflect back to what happened in the first 6 months after being elected, that is city budget time as a newly elected councillor. So the first bit is orientation, which was more significant now than it has been in the past. Council budget, council strategic planning, and then you'll be running right up to. So in terms of the ability to get really deeply understanding of the system and the results, I kind of question a council's ability to do that in the first 6 months. And I think it's something that we can give them some ability to make really, really informed decisions. So I do support having it a 3-year extension. That is still in the first half of their council term. If they wish to make any changes after that, then they will still have the second half of the council term yeah, they can do it before they hit the halfway point if they want to make any changes. But yeah, I would encourage council to support the 3-year term. Councillor Thiessen?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Given. I could go either way on this, but I think what I'm going to lean on is I'm going to support the amendment as proposed by Councillor O'Toole, largely because, as stated by the Mayor, a 1-year term, one would plop it right in the middle of the election, as already was stated. A 2-year term would plop it right after an election, which has already been stated. But in the realms of like the capacity of decision-making that council is responsible for in governance and otherwise, I just see this as a 2-year contract would still set up the next council post-election for emotional decision-making based off of public pressure versus reasoned decision-making. If what we're talking about is educating the public, making them aware of why they're ticketing, where we may be ticketing, and other aspects of that, like the savings for every collision that we don't have in our community, I think that's a good solid basis. And I guess for all those reasons, I think for us, it's always best when we stick to the data and can make reasoned, rational decisions based off of that, rather than emotional ones, which could really take over an election, and it could be one of the top 1 or 2 topics. It's still going to be up there, but I don't want to make it the focus because its deadline is looming. So for that, I'll support 3 years.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. Anybody else on the amendment? I don't see any hands flashing. So then we'll go to the vote on Councillor O'Toole's amendment to the main motion, which was the 3-year term. Councillor O'Toole, did you want to close or are you voting?
No,
You're voting. Okay.
I'm all ready to go. I've been missing a little bit here, so I'm ready to go.
Now that you're back on and you got audio, you're ready to participate. Okay. So I'll call for the vote. Yeah, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of the amendment? So I see 5. And opposed? I see 4. Okay, so the amendment carries on a 3-year term, so we can move on to any other amendments. Councillor Bressie.
Thank you. I'd move to amend a motion to direct administration seek payment terms that are not based on fine revenue. And to speak to that, I really want to have strong confidence when I'm talking to the public that all decisions are being made from a safety, not a revenue lens. And I find that difficult for people to accept when the contractor's revenue is directly based on how much revenue they generate. And for me, I could get on board with having a contractor do this if we were paying them a set amount per month or a set amount per enforcement hour. But when basically where it is if they're making the decision to have a clearly marked vehicle in a playground zone, I don't encourage people not speed so that ticket doesn't get handed out. I don't want that affecting their bottom line, so that's an easier decision to be made that I've got confidence is being made every time when it's appropriate. So for me, I absolutely cannot support a contract renewal with our current payment methodology, but I could vote in favor of a contract renewal if we've got a different way to calculate how much we pay.
Councillor Bressie, so just restate your motion again, just for clarity.
So yeah, move to direct administration to seek payment terms that are not based on fine revenue generated. And so it's basically saying, hey, the way we're doing it right now, I can't accept that, but I don't want to give specific direction around. This is the kind of payment terms that I would accept. Just I can't accept what we have right now.
Okay. Okay, so, and just looking at Arlene, just to make sure that she heard that. So the direction to administration is to seek payment terms that are not directly tied to fine revenue. But, yeah, okay. And I'll just ask Director Manuel, can you, for myself and maybe to help everybody else, can you imagine a system that could be designed to do that?
Yeah.
Is that a practical request, I guess?
It is a practical request. It's something that occurs within the industry. And we do have some baseline data that we previously wouldn't have had. So it's something that we can certainly bring forward to Global and have a discussion around.
Okay, thank you. So it's at least actionable. Thank you. Up for discussion and debate is the Councillor Thiessen and then Councillor Clayton.
I guess I'm looking for a bit of clarity too. Thanks, Mayor Given. Councillor Bressi, your motion, is that to seek out the option of or only? Like if it's to preclude the ticket revenue fine based off of the contract as it stands right now, then I don't know if I can support your motion. If your motion is to show council options as to this is what it looks like here and this is what it looks like as it currently stands, and we can compare that and have that discussion later, I think I can get behind it. But if it's to just preclude what already exists and make it a certain thing, I'm not sure I can support it. So is it to seek out that option, or is it very direct? This is how we want to do it now.
Councillor Bressi?
So yeah, I think how I'd interpret my motion is it's a very direct to administration saying seek terms that aren't payment terms, and that's the position we want to take. That being said, if administration came back to us in a couple weeks and said, hey, we followed your direction, these are the terms we sought, but we weren't able to come to agreement with the contractor, then council at that time would have to decide, what do we do with that? Do we move forward with what administration was able to get? So I think we're saying that this is the position we want administration to bring to the table. If we don't get this direction out of that, we'll have to decide how to respond. I could say that for me, I'm very unlikely to support a contract renewal that if we're not successful in getting these new terms. So my direction is this is the position we should take in as we're approaching the contractor. But I don't think the vote we make today binds council in how we respond to these negotiations.
Okay, yeah, I just, sorry, thanks, Bill, and thanks, Councillor Bressi. I guess my concern is if it's not produced as an option, we won't see options, right? So I guess that's my concern. And sort of my position on it right now, currently the city is doing about 126 hours per week of mobile speed enforcement. Obviously, those hours and terms will be negotiated between the two parties. But I think it's just inevitable that when you're doing 126 hours, which equivalates to about 18 hours per day, I'm going to assume three vehicles, potentially at 6 hours apiece in different areas of the city, that you're going to get tickets. You're gonna establish certain fines, and people are not going to be following those appropriate speed limits. So I don't know if it's directly tied to the revenue that we're getting. These are all based off of course, convictions as well. So if somebody goes in and is found innocent, then they're not being charged. So I think I'd be more comfortable if I was 100% certain that this is coming forward back to council as an option rather than as the system. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Thiessen. So I have Councillor Clayton in on this one, and then I can come back to Councillor Bressi.
Sorry, Mayor Given, I'm not going to enter debate. I'm not going to enter debate. I'll just have to close. But can I just say that I would welcome a friendly amendment if somebody can think of a way that makes us more open to better direction for administration. I'm definitely open to a friendly amendment. I just want to say that.
Sure. Well, I think that would be to bring forward options for payment, including, and then what you said.
And if you guys are more comfortable, I'm definitely open to that friendly amendment. Makes my motion.
Okay. Okay. So so Councillor Bressi, you'd accept that sort of as a, okay. So we don't have to vote on that one. So Councillor Bressi's motion would be direct administration bring forward the contract renewal with options for payment, including an option for payment that is not directly tied to fine revenue. Okay. That's that. You're good with that, Councillor Bressi?
Yep.
Make sure, because it is your motion. We're not going to vote on it. Okay. Okay, Councillor Clayton.
Thanks, Mayor Given. A question for Director Manuel. Based on the first go-around of contracts, there was a preference for this contractor, and it was based on a few things, assuming after evaluation it made sense through proper procurement processes. Do you see this as an option, what Councillor Bressi is suggesting, knowing the limitations and expectations from this existing contractor? Is this an option? Because this sort of goes back to my original comment. If we're going to renew a contractor, but we're going to just change it all, then we should open it up to any contractor. So to me, I don't want to go down the sole sourcing path. I don't want to go down the discussion of, I understand there's financial implications and savings to us. There's utilization, savings, and opportunities to us by sticking with the same contractor. But if we're going to change it so much, then we should just open it all up. is my thought. So tell me, Director Manuel, is this something you consider possible, or what that would look like?
Okay,
Director
so
Manuel?
speak to it. So one, we can't go to the market right now is one answer because there's a provincial freeze. We can't incorporate new technologies into, or new installations into the community. So that would limit that option right there. Going back to when we did the original procurement, for the automated traffic enforcement services, we, so two things. One, we evaluated all the technology was available, and frankly, it hasn't changed a great deal since that time. And Global's technology was the only proponent that had that non-radar based technology, which is what we desired. And additionally, as far as cost structure within the industry, there's three models that are prevalent. One is fixed fee, which is what Councillor Bressy is discussing. One's fixed fee, base fixed fee with a certain level of tickets, and excess tickets come with an additional fee. And then there's the straight fee-based percentage of tickets model. So all three are fairly common. What is being requested is certainly something we can bring back. It is not their regular approach to business. It has a little bit, there's positives and negatives to it. So I'm fine bringing it back. I just do want to be cautious that we are not in a position for the market right now with other vendors at this time.
Thanks, Councillor, Director Manuel. And David, I appreciated your sort of willingness to step out of the meeting, and just, I'm sort of making the observations the faces on the screen are sort of my council colleagues in administration. I appreciate that you're there as a resource. And maybe even at this point, if you would, if you want to take your screen and just, turn off the video, by all means, no problem with you listening in as you're in, council chambers. But you wouldn't be one of the faces I'd normally be staring at during discussion and debate on the terms. Thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, Councillor Blackburn, I had you next, I think, on this.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I can't support this amendment, primarily because, first of all, I have a great deal of trust in and respect for Global and their practices so far. And David has expressed an interest in safety over revenue. But by the same token, if Global is sometimes motivated by revenue, then that's probably going to help us as a city to have them recognize the places where it's most likely that people are speeding. And if we take that away from them, I think all we're doing really is protecting speeders from being caught. And I don't think that that's our intention at all. So I would not want to change our payment method away from ticket revenue for those reasons. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Blackburn. I'll just jump in and say I will support the direction to administration because I would like to see the option. The thing that I will be evaluating when we see the option is how much risk the city is assuming. The methodology right now basically is a shared risk in terms of budgeting. Probably Global and the city make some estimation of what the number of tickets is going to be, and the city budgets appropriately, and and we account for the revenue that we think we would see. If we now say there is a fixed amount or a certain amount that is not directly tied to fine revenue, then the city, I think, is assuming more budgeting risk and risk of making correct assumptions and estimations. I trust our administration is able to do that, but I think we should acknowledge that really the question that we're talking about here is which party in the contract shares, takes the majority of the budgeting risk. And so I'm open to considering that, but I would like to see some estimation or some discussion when it comes back about administration's confidence. If we budget X dollars per year to pay Global for the service, and for whatever reason, half the city stops driving, for example, in a global pandemic, that it just happens to come up as a good example, the revenue would go down. We would still be obligated to pay that amount.
And so that's just an illustration of the type of risk that we'd be accepting in that payment methodology. I'm open to considering that, but I just would like to see some discussion when it comes forward about administration's assessment of that risk. Director Manuel, I saw your hand.
Yeah, and I just want to speak, we'll be able to provide that analysis because prior to Global, we had a contract that was fixed based, and we know exactly what the advantages and disadvantages of the two are.
Yeah, so as I say, I support the direction to administration, and I will, decide when we see it based on that risk discussion. I think did I see another hand on this issue? No?
I'd close if I've got the opportunity.
Sure. Yeah, okay. Doesn't look like anybody else. Councillor Bressy, to close on your amendment.
Yeah, thank you. I hope the council support this, and I hope that when it comes to council will insist on having non-fine-based revenue payments. And just a bit of pushback about some of what I heard is, first, do we want I don't want Global targeting the places where they know there are speeders. I want them targeting the place where they know there are speeders who are putting the public at risk. And if there's a decision between targeting a road where there's lots of speeders, but there's no pedestrian, low traffic, well, I don't want that to be prioritized over a road where there's less speeders, but there's a lot of pedestrians in the area. So the speeders that are there can be a lot more risky. And I think that whether or not those decisions are being made appropriately now, I think there's a lot of the public that doesn't have that confidence. During the provincial review, something that they did was they did a random surveying of Albertans on their perceptions of photo enforcement. And that review found that a majority of Albertans thought that photo enforcement should have a role in finding people. Majority of Albertans thought that photo enforcement does make roads safer, but a minority of Albertans thought that it made roads safer in their communities. And I think that shows that there's not opposition philosophically to people in photo enforcement, but there's a lot of opposition and mistrust in how it's done at the local level. And I think us being above reproach and our contractor being above reproach in terms of that, you guys just park where you can make the most revenue, helps instill that public confidence. And when it comes to police and enforcement, public confidence is an important consideration for me. And so I hope that council will support this motion and insist on non-fine-based revenue when this gets to council.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Bressy. So that was the close on the amendment, which was to direct administration to bring forward options for the contract renewal that would have payment terms not tied to fine revenue. So we'll call for the vote. All in favor of that amendment? And opposed? Okay, so I see one opposed. Okay, thank you. Were there any other amendments that we wanted to make in terms of providing additional direction to administration on the things that we would like to see them include in this contract extension? I'll go to Councillor Friesen.
Thank you, Mayor Given. Would this be the place to suggest inclusion of overt as well as covert vehicles?
Sure. Yeah, I think this would be a place, and then administration could bring back to us how they would include that in that renewal. So if we give them that direction now, we would see that when they bring it back. So, Councilor, if you want to make a motion to that effect.
Yeah. So I will move that we amend this to include the consideration of a mix of overt and covert vehicles in the program.
Okay, thank you. I think that's pretty clear. So, I mean, at a really basic level, overt being, clearly visible and marked vehicles, and covert being, I guess, a similar sort of process to what's there today. Any discussion or debate on that point? Councillor Bressy.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope that this gets supported. I hope that we insist on, my take would be when it comes back to council for approval, I'd hope that we'd see 50% mix of the both. And again, I'd point to that provincial photo radar review, where as part of their literature review, they took data from across the world and looked at the difference in safety outcomes from municipalities that used overt and covert methods, and they found no difference in the safety outcomes of having both those methods. So those people who say, well, if you make these overt, people will only slow down when they actually see them, that's not supported by the evidence. But I'd also point out to work coming out from Dr. Amy Kim at the U of A Engineering Department has done a lot of work looking at photo enforcement in Alberta specifically, and her recommendations in a bunch of her articles is to make sure that enforcement is both. The phrasing she uses is that we need publicity and unpredictability in our program. And what she's found is the programs that are the most successful are the ones where they beat you on their head that they're present in your community, but they also don't advertise exactly where they are. So you've always got those visual reminders of, oh, if I'm speeding, I'm likely to get a fine, but also I can't pick and choose the locations where we are. So I think there's very solid academic evidence and database evidence that it's important to have a blending of these two, and I don't think we're hitting that balance right now in our community. So I hope council will support this.
Thanks, Councillor Bressy. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Mayor Given. Having heard what David Steer already had to say on this topic, it looks like Global is already prepared and practices the concept of being visible in places where it's really important, like on construction sites and school zones, because the effect is to slow traffic down in a place where we really depend on the traffic slowing down. So I'm not sure that this amendment is necessary, but I won't oppose it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Blackburn. Anything else on this amendment? I don't see anything. Then we'll call for the vote on Councillor Friesen's amendment. All in favor? Okay, and opposed? I see one opposed. Councillor Minhas. Okay, thanks very much. And sorry, Councillor Plott, did we get you in that vote? Were you in favor or opposed? You're in favor? Okay, thank you. So I just want to make sure that the screen moved around and I couldn't remember if I counted you or not. Okay, so were there any other direction to administration that we wanted to incorporate in this? Councillor Bressy.
Great, thank you. A question for Director Manuel. This might actually be a motion that should come after Councillor Thiesen's motion is voted on. So I don't know if I'm going to be making a motion right now or not, but I do want to make a motion regarding site selection and where enforcement vehicles park. Would those have contract implications? So therefore, they should be part of this motion, or would that be outside of this contract that you guys are negotiating?
So I'm going to suggest that it's outside the contract because it's really the RCMP and enforcement that determine that. And so certainly the feedback will be useful. But yeah, it is outside the contract.
Great. So I've got a motion I'd like to make after this one comes, but no omitting motions.
Okay. Okay. So were there any other things for direction to administration on inclusions or considerations we want to include in the contract? Councillor Clayton.
Sorry, Mayor Given, no changes or suggestions. Just wondering if the motion as a whole can be read.
Sure. Yeah. Arlene, can you go through what you've been able to record there?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Given. The whole motion, including all of the amendment pieces, will be like this. Moved by Councillor Thiessen, committee recommend council direct administration to exercise our contract renewal option for automated traffic enforcement services and negotiate the specifics of such with Global Traffic Group Limited and allow for the following. Number one, to include an education component in ticket mail-out. Number two, to include a 3-year term. Number three, to negotiate terms, including options for payment that are not directly tied to fine revenue. And number four, consideration for inclusion of the use of overt and covert vehicles.
Okay. Thanks very much, Arlene. Everybody's heard that. Yeah. Okay, so if there isn't any other discussion or debate on that full package, Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I would like to speak in favor of the motion for a number of reasons, because I'm very concerned if this were to be defeated, because there are so many things about the relationship that we have with Global that I like. So just to reiterate some of the things that we heard this morning from Chris and from David, I like Global's flexibility, such as their willingness to put inserts into the mailings and to discuss regularly location decisions. I like the innovation that Global practices, and I like their unsolicited innovations and improvements, such as the GPS mapping that's done regarding locations. I like the fact that they're responsible for training of staff and for the maintenance of the equipment. So that's something that would be onerous for us to do if we were to take this on by ourselves. I think that we get the provision of insights into trends and so on that are useful for our own enforcement people to use. And as far as our own advantages, we have a reputation in this province for being leaders in a lot of areas, such as the RCMP Collision Reporting Center and the perspectives that we brought on safe injection sites and many, many other areas. And I think that having a well-disciplined ATE system is something else that we can point to as being a leader in the province. And so for those kinds of reasons, I'm hoping that even if the government responds negatively to the idea of ATE, our reputation may allow us to carry on. And certainly having a 3-year term is something that may exclude us from a cancellation, depending on the kind of decision that the government would make. I would really hate for us to not have a 3-year contract with Global. So I will be voting in favor. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Blackburn. Any other discussion or debate? Councillor Bressie.
I think for me, I'll vote in favor of this motion, but only because I know it's coming to council again in terms of, I know that there's very solid evidence that ATE does help with safety in communities, including in our own community. And I'd note that, again, look at that provincial review. I was very encouraged to see it and see that Grande Prairie actually collects less ATE revenue per capita and has less ATE hours per capita than our comparator municipalities in Alberta, which shows me that we've got a good balance of ATE versus conventional enforcement going on in our community. At the same time, the provincial review and also all the other academic research I've read shows that we're behind a lot of the world. We might be ahead of Alberta in a lot of best practices, but we're behind a lot of the rest of Canada and a lot of the rest of the world in a lot of best practices that are adopted elsewhere. And for me, I can't, as much as I support AT, I can't support the status quo. And 2 hills to die on for me are that covert versus overt enforcement and also the way that payments are generated. So I can definitely support this for further conversation at council, but I absolutely won't be supporting when it comes to council if I don't see some significant change in the way we're going to do this going forward.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bressie. Any other discussion or debate? Recognizing that today we're providing direction to administration and that, ultimately that will come back for council to choose whether or not to go forward into the contract. So I don't see anybody. So then I will call for the vote on the motion and all those amendments that we have. All those in favor of that direction to administration? Okay, that looks to be unanimous. So Director Manuel, when would we expect to see this come back?
That's a good question. Just looking at the meetings. I'm going to suggest, well, I'm open to suggestion. I know we have committee meetings on the 12th, and then we have a council meeting on the 18th. Would a CCW before council, perhaps, on the 18th be appropriate? I'm open to suggestion.
Well, would we need to have this come to, I think it would probably just come straight to council. The administration would do the work, we'd come to council. It would seem extra just to to have a committee meeting that we refer to council that night. So I think we just bring it to under the report section as to the council meeting, and then we can have discussion right there. You see the city manager also nodding and supporting that suggestion. Okay. Okay. So then that would come back the 18th then to that council meeting.
It's actually, thank you, Mayor Given. It's actually going to be May 19th, Chris. May 18th is the step.
Right. Right.
I was willing to work, but we'll do it then.
I appreciate your commitment. Okay. So if that's everything on that, then Councillor Bressie had something.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Given. I've got a few other motions related to photo enforcement that I'd like to try my luck at, but they're outside that contract. And so the first one that I'd like to move is that administration bring forward options to report fine revenues separate from enforcement services and RCMP departmental budgets. And for me, I really don't like that the revenue from fines is tied up in, when we're looking at variance reports, they're tied up in those departments. When we're looking at financial statements, they're tied up in those departments. And I don't like that for two reasons. One is I don't think it gives a lot of transparency to the public about how much we're actually generating on fines. And the other one is I do have a lot of confidence that when Mr. Kokesh and Mr. Manuel are looking at the enforcement, that they are prioritizing safety, and that's their big priority, not revenue. At the same time, council's putting a lot of fiscal pressure on our organization right now, and I don't think that it's fair to ask our managers at the same time that they're working their best to make sure we don't have any opportunity to hand out speeding tickets, to also have pressure on their budget that is relieved by increased fine revenue. So I'd really like to have this stripped out of the reporting we usually do. And what my motion isn't saying, hey, do this with your financial reports, because I'd like to hear finance's advice on how this could be done. My motion is just to bring forward options to report fine revenues separate from these departmental budgets. Okay. Okay. Thanks very much. Anything on that point? Councillor Clayton, I also see the director there, corporate services, may have some comment. Councillor Clayton first.
Yeah, just before we actually vote, can you read just the motion? Thanks.
Yeah, so it's to bring forward options to report fine revenues separate from the enforcement services and RCMP departmental budgets. Okay, okay, thanks for that clarity. Director Bork, do you see any challenges in providing us options on how to do that?
There will be some points we'll raise when we do bring the options forward, but no challenge bringing options forward. Okay, okay, thank you. Any discussion or debate on Councillor Bressie's motion? Seeing none, then I'll call for the vote. Please vote. All in favor? And opposed? I see 2 opposed. Thank you. Thanks very much, everybody. Okay. Anything further, Councillor Bressie? Yeah, thank you. The next motion I want to make is to direct administration to bring to budget deliberations an option to add a dedicated staff resource to oversee the automated enforcement program. And for me, it's concerning to hear that this is being run off the side of a manager's desk. Again, it's a very important safety initiative that we've seen good results from, and we need to, and frankly, one accident is too much in the city, so I'd like to see even better results from it in the future. It's also something that's very high in the public consciousness, whether people are for or against it, they're passionate about it, and I want to make sure we're managing public expectations and public concerns and public ideas for improvement very effectively. And also it is just a significant program with significant, very significant gross revenue, and also somewhat significant net revenue. So I think that we're doing a disservice if this is run off the side of a few desks. I think we should have dedicated staff resources for it. The motion isn't specific in terms of, I'm not saying it needs to be an FTE. Maybe there's a way in the budget to create a part-time position for it. So I'm not being specific about what that resource would look like, but I'd like us to have a conversation at budget based on administration's recommendation of how can we better resource our oversight of this program. Okay, thanks, Councillor Bressie. Any discussion, debate? Councillor Blackburn?
Thank you, Mayor Given. I'd be interested in Director Manuel's perspective on this, whether or not he thinks this is something that's run off the side of his desk. He seems to be very knowledgeable in it, and I'd just like to hear his perspective.
Director Manuel?
Thank you. So, I appreciate the motion, and I think it is a worthwhile exercise for us to go through. I think one of the challenges is I do have a fair bit of knowledge about it, but it's probably not the director's role to have the operational responsibilities that come along with making some of the changes that I think council would like us to see. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean that we may not be able to look internally to see what we already have that might be able to support that. And additionally, some places like the city of Edmonton operated under their traffic engineer, under their Office of Traffic Safety, which is kind of an independent branch aside from enforcement. So I think there's some models for us to look at, and I think it's a worthy motion of us exploring and bringing something back.
Thanks, Director Manuel. Councillor Plott.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I think it's a good idea too. I think more so if there is a conversation down the road of stripping this out, not looking at it, that there is an implication of staff time attached to it. So I think it's a good motion, a good exercise to go through. On that, I will say my battery's at 1% right now, and I didn't bring a charger. So if I die out before you make that, I might miss the vote. But my apologies for not bringing a charger to work with me there.
Thanks, Councillor Plott. Councillor O'Toole.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could read that motion again, just a little slower.
Yeah, so
sure, I'll go to the city clerk just to see how she's recorded, and that way we can check two things at once.
Gee, thank you, Mayor Given. The motion is moved by Councillor Bressy, Committee Direct Administration, to bring forward to the fall budget deliberations consideration for a staff position to oversee the augmented traffic enforcement program.
Okay. Thank you. Or maybe just to clarify, Councillor Bressy, the traffic and sorry, it said augmented traffic enforcement program. I think you meant the automated traffic enforcement. Yeah, because it's just so it's clear that this isn't based on us doing more of that program. Okay. Yeah, Councillor Bressy.
And also, just to be clear, I don't know if it needs to be cleared up in the motion or not, but the phrasing I used was dedicated staff resource. To me, I want to be clear that to me, it doesn't necessarily have to be a full-time equivalent employee. It just needs to be a resource of some sort that this is a specific part of their job.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Bressy. Any other discussion or debate? I'll just say I'm open to seeing that. I think that the dedicated resource is the manager of enforcement services, and it's their responsibility to run this program. And so I'll weigh that when we see the numbers at budget, or about sort of reallocating that responsibility somewhere else. So I think that this is already a basket of work that the manager of enforcement services does, and it's part of their job responsibilities. That probably shows up in their job information sheet or whatever it is that administration has. So, but I'll weigh that carefully against any additional costs that we might see at budget, but I'll support the motion for now. Anybody else? Okay, seeing nothing, then I'll call for the vote on Councillor Bressy's motion. All in favor? Okay, and that looks unanimous. Okay, and was there anything else to come forward? Councillor Bressy.
And then this is my last one, so thank you for your patience, Council. I appreciate it. But for me, it would be to move that Council refer discussion about guidelines surrounding site selection and the placement of automated enforcement vehicles to the appropriate committee. And just talk about this, I know that we've all heard concerns about are we picking sites with the appropriate criteria, and what about that vehicle that's parked in a place where usually you can't park and might be illegal, but maybe it's not something we want. And I think that as this is a good opportunity to be reviewing our site selection and where they're allowed. Maybe we want to make changes, maybe we don't. But I think that as we're reviewing this program, a wholesome review wouldn't be wholesome if it wasn't looking at sites as well. Might be a little bit too in the weeds for this committee, and especially 2+ hours into a meeting. But I think this conversation should happen at some committee. And I'm leaving the motion vague in terms of I'm just saying to the appropriate committee. So I'll let administration decide if this passes where that lands. But in my mind, if council moves forward today with approving terms of reference for a police advisory committee, that would probably be a very appropriate place for this to go. But if council doesn't, I want to make sure that we're leaving options that if we don't approve that there's still, it can still come somewhere.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Rusty. I'll go first to Director Manuel.
I'll go to our two administrative members, Director Manuel, City Manager Galante, and then to Councillor Blackburn.
Sure. I appreciate the motion. I think I just want to be clear that going to committee, the committee would not have the authority as per the province to select zones. That has to be done solely by the RCMP as our police service jurisdiction. There can certainly be a discussion as to why they chose that zone in some communication, but just so we're clear, the committee won't have the authority to do that.
City Manager Galante, did you have anything additional or more comment?
No, exactly as Director Manuel mentioned. Perhaps what we can do is some sort of session to show how the sites are selected by using the RCMP criteria. So there will be a better understanding to council about the why some sites are selected, the different criteria. The same applies with the allocation of resources in terms of dedicating a number of hours, whatever it is, a full-time person, a part-time, 1/4 of a full-time. That is management purview. We perform a full analysis of resources and demands as part of our budget preparations. So if there is a need to allocate a resource, whatever it is, 0.5 or 1/4 a full-time person, you will see that coming as part of our CLD review. So just cautious about allocation of resources at this level. Thank you.
So Councillor Blackburn and then Councillor Clayton.
Thank you, Mayor Given. I think that this would be getting way too far into the weeds. I really do think that if we want to talk about the philosophy of zone location and some of our preferences that we might want to express to the RCMP for good, solid reasons, then it might be something that our strategic working group committee could toss around. But I wouldn't want to go any further than that, so I would not support this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Blackburn. I'm just going to have to step out for a second. So we've got Councillor Clayton next and then Councillor O'Toole.
Thanks, Mayor Given. I do support the comments in regards to Director Galante and CAO Galante and Director Manuel. My concern is I want no personal input or responsibility in deciding where these devices go. I like the idea of getting information at a standing committee, but I won't support the fact that council will be directly having input on where these locations go. So the way I understand the motion now, I think we're fine. And so Councillor Blackburn, the motion wouldn't give us the input, but I do appreciate your concern. It's truly just for an information session. So I encourage council to support this motion. Thanks.
I guess I can talk now. I think as a role of a councillor, we're supposed to take information based on facts and current information. And I'm not sure if we need to have a motion to deal with this. So I'm not in support of this motion at all. I think that when we have our committee meetings or CCWs, we have the facts given to us by our corporate leadership team, and like it was stated, the RCMP are the deciding factors on where those locations should be. And if we have problems, we can definitely bring them up and we can review them. But I don't think it's something that we should have a specific meeting about or talk. So that's my view. I'm not supporting this.
Okay, thanks, Councillor O'Toole. Any other discussion or debate on the motion before I go to Councillor Bressie to close? Okay, I don't see anybody else. Councillor Bressie?
Great. Thank you. Two thoughts. First of all, I want to be really clear that my motion is discussion around guidelines surrounding sites, where I definitely understand that it's the RCMP that gets to make those decisions about where they go, and I fully and even if that wasn't provincial legislation, I'd still fully support that. That's the way that it operates, and I certainly don't want a committee getting into saying, why are we doing it on 116th Street at this intersection, not this intersection 2 blocks down? Certainly don't want to do that, but I think that it makes sense to talk about the guidelines around them and just make sure is the general philosophical approach our community has still working for our community, and that's provide direction to RCMP, but get better understanding from the RCMP so that it can be better communicated with the public when concerns come up, but also to provide advice to the RCMP about whether or not it still works. And also, I just kind of acknowledge the awkward timing of where we are at right now in terms of, as of this afternoon, we might be forming a police advisory committee or we might not, but if we do, then really what the effect of, how I see the effect of this motion is asking them to do some work for us and kind of saying, hey, here's something specific that's of high public concern that we think you guys would be good for. And yeah, so I think it's, and if we don't form one, then I think this should be a conversation, but I'd love that we have at one of our normal council standing committees, but also don't want to waste you guys' time and add it to a meeting agenda if council's completely uninterested in having this conversation, which is why I'm making this motion now instead of just using my prerogative to ask for it to be added to an agenda at a normal meeting.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bressie. So we'll call for the vote on Councillor Bressie's motion of that direction to administration. And you need to have it read back. Are we okay? Councillor Friesen, do you want to hear it again?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Given. Moved by Councillor Bressie, committee refer the discussion regarding guidelines for the selection of zones for vehicle placements for the automated traffic enforcement program to the appropriate committee.
Okay, thank you. So we've got that motion read back. I see Councillor Bressie nodding that his motion is intended. So I'll call for the vote. All in favor of Councillor Bressie's motion? I see 2. And opposed? Okay, I see 6. Councillor Palat has exited the meeting due to lack of charger. So that motion does not carry. Do we have anything else to come forward today? I don't see anything. And if that's the case, I'll just check in with Director Manuel. Director Manuel, you've got some direction from council. We heard that this would come back at the May 19th council meeting. Do you have everything you need from us today?
I do. I look forward to being a local celebrity later today.
Yeah, exactly. Whenever this discussion gets a bump in the media, Director Manuel is everybody's favorite person. Okay, so I think that's everything then for our council committee of the whole. We'll adjourn and then we'll see everybody later this afternoon for our city council meeting. See you in a little while, everyone.